This program is provided by Universal Genesis.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We tackle the tough source material, do the heavy lifting, and basically give you the shortcut to the core ideas. And today, we're diving into something pretty ambitious, a massive reconstruction project, really. Our sources lay out this systematic attempt to redefine modern metaphysics, the bedrock of reality, but not based on the old philosophical schools. No, this is built on 100 core findings from current science. We're talking quantum physics, AI theory, evolutionary biology, economics. Yeah, and all these scientific points. They got distilled down into 10 key philosophical propositions. So our mission today is to unpack this huge shift in perspective, moving from what's usually called the philosophy of being to what these sources call the metaphysics of becoming.
And that shift is, well, it's fundamental. For centuries, maybe millennia, Western thought has mostly been searching for fixed truths, right? The unchanging essence of things. This new framework basically says, hang on, that search for permanence, it just doesn't match up with what science, especially modern science, dealing with flow, complexity, evolution, tells us about reality. So we're sort of tearing down those basic assumptions about existence, about time, to reflect a universe that's constantly, ceaselessly generating itself.
Right. And here's the really fun part, I think. The sources didn't just build this new framework and stop. Oh, no. They turned it back on history. They used it to grade 2,500 years of philosophy, ruthlessly. From the ancient Greeks all the way to thinkers today, we get to see who apparently got this idea of cosmic flow and, well, who kind of missed the boat. Okay, so let's start right there, this big revision. What's the absolute core difference between that classical philosophy of being and this new metaphysics of becoming?
Fundamentally, it's like the difference between thinking of reality as a noun versus thinking of it as a verb. The classical view, think Parmenides, Plato, tends to see existence as some kind of fixed, static substance, a core thing that doesn't change. Change, in that view, is often seen as secondary, maybe even just an illusion, compared to these eternal forms or substances.
Okay, so being is static, substance.
Right, whereas the metaphysics of becoming flips that completely. It defines existence itself as a continuous, ongoing process. It's about change, relation, generation. It's an event, or maybe better, a constant flow, not a substance. And that's thesis one, existence is becoming.
And the sources really lean on science to back this up, which I think helps ground what could be very abstract philosophy.
Absolutely. Take life itself, evolutionary biology, for instance. It doesn't define life as a static object. Life is self-organization that maintains itself precisely through change. It's a classic example of what physicists call non-equilibrium thermodynamics in action.
Okay, non-equilibrium thermodynamics. That's a bit of a mouthful right at the start. Can you give us a quick, analogy for that?
Sure. Think of a rock. It's just sitting there, stable.
Right.
That's equilibrium. Nothing much is happening. But now think of a candle flame or a living cell. They're fundamentally processes, right? A flame only exists because it's constantly taking in wax and oxygen, changing, putting out light and heat. A cell needs energy, needs to change, needs to expel waste.
Ah, okay. So they exist because they're changing, because they're in this constant flow state, not in spite of it.
Exactly. That's how these sources see existence itself. And physics provides more backing. Yeah. Quantum field theory, for example, tells us elementary particles aren't like tiny solid billiard balls. They're more like continuous excitations or ripples in an underlying field, a constant sort of flickering stream of events.
Nothing's fixed, just the patterns of the flow might seem stable.
Precisely.
What I found really striking was how the sources pulled these threads together from biology, from physics, into this one single metaphysical statement. The grand synthesis. Let's just state it clearly because it's dense.
Yeah.
Existence is the process of information recursively generating itself within the fluctuation of nothingness, where material, consciousness, and time are merely different phases of that flow.
Wow. Yeah, let's pause on that. That synthesis just dissolves so many old distinctions. The old idea of solid matter, our own consciousness, even time is this linear arrow. They're all just different aspects, maybe different speeds or forms, of this underlying self-generating information flow.
Okay, but that immediately makes you ask, if it's all flow, what's flowing? If matter isn't really stuff, then what is it?
That's where information comes in, is absolutely key. Thesis 2 basically states that matter and information aren't separate things. They're just two aspects of the same underlying reality. Matter is, you could say, the stabilized, maybe slower form of information. Information is the more fluid, dynamic form.
You see that in biology, right? DNA is physical matter, but it carries information, a dynamic process. Same with brain circuits.
Exactly. And the sources bring in physics again, like the Landauer principle. It shows a thermodynamic link between energy and information. You really can't pull them apart.
Okay, so existence is this interconnected information flow. That must change how we think about cause and effect, too.
It has to. Which brings us to thesis 3. Causality is a network, not a simple chain, and it doesn't necessarily have a fixed direction. This really shatters that classical linear A causes B picture.
Wait a second. If the difference between cause and effect depends on how you look at it, does that undermine science? Does it make causality just subjective?
Not subjective, no, but relational. That's the key. It means in a really complex, interconnected system, like the kind chaos theory describes, where tiny changes can have huge effects down the line, trying to pin down one single cause often doesn't make much sense. The whole system is interacting.
Like the butterfly effect.
Sort of, yeah. And think about quantum entanglement. You see effects happening seemingly instantly across distances, faster than light could travel. It challenges our simple notions of temporal order in causality. The network itself is the causal field.
That must mess with our understanding of time itself then, right? If causality isn't just a straight line.
Exactly. Which leads into the whole temporal metaphysics part of the forces. Thesis 4 suggests time isn't some fixed container we move through. It's the dynamic difference between events.
And following from that.
Thesis 7 defines the present, the now, as the fluid intersection, where the past structure meets future possibilities. It's the moment the whole network converges to generate what happens next.
That's fascinating. Okay, so the universe is this huge generating network of information. Where do we fit in? Where does the mind, consciousness come into this flow?
Right, that brings us to consciousness. Thesis 5 proposes. Consciousness isn't just some random biological accident. It's the self-reference of the cosmos. Our human consciousness is, in a way, the universe becoming aware of itself, perceiving its own information structures.
So we're like the universe looking at itself.
In a sense, yes. We're the self-generated loop within this vast system. This ties into ideas like integrated information theory, where consciousness arises from complex, self-referential information processing. The universe is observing and organizing itself through systems like us.
And that connects directly to Thesis 6, which feels crucial for the next part. Nature is a single continuous process that includes humanity.
Yes, absolutely crucial. If existence is flow and consciousness is that flow reflecting on itself, then you can't have these hard, sharp divisions, mind versus matter, humanity versus nature. Those breaks don't hold up. We aren't detached observers looking at nature. We're integral parts of its ongoing generation.
Okay, I think we've got the core framework laid out. Existence is flow. Information is the currency. Causality is a network. And we're the system reflecting on itself, embedded within it. Now, let's apply this lens to history. Time for the great philosophical report card. This is where it gets juicy.
It really does. And it's quite a tough grading system. The sources set up this 100-point metric. And it's heavily weighted towards how well a philosopher understood dynamism and interconnectedness. Key things were generation understanding, grasping existence as creative process, worth 25 points.
Okay.
And relationship insight, understanding interdependence, nonlinear cause, worth 20 points. Big chunks of the grade.
So we're basically asking, did these historical thinkers anticipate in some way the conclusions of 21st century complexity, science, and physics?
Pretty much, yeah. And the story that emerges is this long 2,500-year struggle in the West, moving away from seeking the static and trying to embrace the dynamic. And what's really striking is that, according to this grading, some Eastern philosophies kind of started where the West is only now arriving.
Okay, let's get to the results, the top 10. Who aced the test? Who got the perfect 100?
Well, the perfect 100 score was actually shared. It went to Nagarjuna, the founder of Mahayana Buddhist philosophy, especially ideas about emptiness, Shunyat, and also to Laozi and Zhuangzi, the key figures in Taoism.
A perfect score for both. Why? What did they get so right, according to this framework?
Because they seem to grasp the unity of nothingness, or maybe better, nothingness and generation, right from the start. For Nagarjuna, emptiness doesn't mean a void. It means nothing has a fixed, independent, inherent substance.
Okay.
And paradoxically, that very lack of fixed self-nature is what allows for interdependence, flow, and constant change. It's the condition for becoming.
And the Tao?
The Tao is pretty much the ultimate principle of this self-generating dynamic flow. So the sources basically concluded that this Eastern grasp of flow was both incredibly early and conceptually spot on.
Fascinating. Okay, let's jump way forward. Who scored highest from the Western tradition in the modern era?
The top modern Western score, third place overall with 98 points, went to Alfred North Whitehead.
Whitehead. Makes sense. His process philosophy.
Exactly. his philosophy of event, or occurrence. The sources saw it as the most systematic modern articulation of this generative view. He really tried to build a metaphysics out of processes, not static things, and deeply integrated physics. It held up really well against this becoming test.
And who else scored highly?
Right behind him, fifth place with 95 points, was Friedrich Nietzsche.
Ah, Nietzsche. Will to power, eternal recurrence.
Yes, mostly for his relentless focus on continuous creation, the dynamism of the will to power, and that idea of the eternal recurrence, which emphasizes becoming over being. Both Whitehead and Nietzsche strongly affirmed flux.
Okay, now for the other end of the scale, the thinkers who maybe unintentionally set up the intellectual roadblocks, the worst 10, who's at the absolute bottom?
Rock bottom, with a score of just 20 out of 100. Parmenides.
The ancient Greek. Why so low?
Because he's basically the founding father of Western static metaphysics. He's the one who famously declared that change and motion are just illusions. Reality, for him, was this one: eternal, unchanging, fixed being. So if you're grading based on understanding becoming, he's fundamentally arguing for the exact opposite. He's the anti-answer key.
Right. Okay, who else is down there? You mentioned René Descartes scored surprisingly low, only 35 points. The father of modern philosophy.
Yeah, Descartes takes a big hit here. According to this framework, his major sin was twofold. First, establishing that I think, therefore I am, it sets up subjectivity as a fixed, static foundation point separate from the world.
The thinking thing.
Exactly. And second, and maybe even more damaging from this perspective, he sliced nature in two. Mind, the thinking stuff, res cogitans, and matter, the extended mechanical stuff, res extensa. Two separate substances that barely interact.
And that breaks thesis 6, right? The idea that nature and humanity are part of one continuous process.
Precisely. That mind-matter split, that mechanical view of nature with a disconnected mind observing it, it completely stops the flow, conceptually. It's directly opposed to the integrated information system view.
And Plato. He was fourth worst with 50 points. Also feels low for such a giant.
Plato's problem, in this view, is that he devalued the world of change, our world, the world of generation. He saw it as inferior, just a shadow of the real world, the eternal, perfect, unchanging realm of the forms or ideas.
So he prioritized the fixed over the flow.
Massively. Diverting philosophical energy towards contemplating these static ideals rather than understanding and engaging with the dynamic reality we actually live in, that's seen as a major misstep from the becoming perspective.
It's kind of wild to think about. Parmenides, Plato, Descartes, yet they score so low because they were searching for fixity. It really shows how deep those assumptions run.
That's really the punchline of the whole report card, isn't it? The very effort to establish fixed, eternal truths, which drove so much of Western philosophy, ironically laid the groundwork for the kind of rigorous, objective science.
That would eventually show that reality isn't fixed in that way.
Exactly. They built the tools that ultimately helped dismantle the static picture they were trying to create.
So, okay, we've seen the framework, we've seen the historical critique. What does all this mean for us now? If existence is this constant flow, does that leave any room for purpose, for value?
Well, that brings us right to the practical payoff, really. Thesis 10 states, the purpose of metaphysics isn't just to explain the world, but to support generation. Philosophy's role actually shifts. It's not just about observing and understanding. It becomes about actively participating in and nurturing this continuous flow. It becomes praxis.
So if the goal is supporting generation, supporting the flow, how does that redefine what we consider good or valuable?
It redefines it in almost ecological terms. Thesis 8 suggests that value isn't based on abstract rules, but it's rooted in the sustainability of relationships and the ability to keep the life-generating flow going. So goodness becomes the act of increasing connections, increasing relationships that sustain generation. It's a systemic value. Does this action help the flow continue, or does it hinder it?
So we start by realizing existence is an event, a process, not a thing, and we end with a purpose, to help the event keep happening.
Exactly. And this leads to one final provocative thought that ties it right back to you, the listener. If time is just the difference between events, and the present is where past structure meets future potential, the sources suggest our whole idea of knowledge might be changing too.
How so?
The future of reason, they argue, might be shifting away from just knowing, accumulating static facts towards caring. Or maybe more precisely, towards developing a sensitivity to relationships.
Sensitivity to relationships as a new form of intelligence.
That's the implication. So that's the new intelligence. And your value is measured by how well you support the flow. The final question this Metaphysics of Becoming leaves us with is, how do you need to change your actions right now in this present moment to better support the continuous generative flow of all the systems, biological, social, informational, that you are fundamentally a part of?
That's definitely something to chew on. A call to action grounded in the nature of reality itself.
This program is provided by Universal Genesis.